Welcome back to the OKTurbo shop. There's supposed to be a Tulsa rocketry launch tomorrow, but I mean, this is northeast Oklahoma and it's very windy. I mean, it's a beautiful day, but it's very windy. So the likelihood of us having a launch tomorrow is pretty slim. So most of my content has been either rocket builds or launches. So what I thought I'd do this time was, I kind of notice every once in a while on the rocketry forum that there are guys that still have questions about dual deployment. It's kind of one of those things, after you've done it for a while, you kind of take for granted what you know. So, I mean, I'm by no means an expert. I'm NAR level 1, so I'm not like some giant rocket guy that builds these, supersonic kind of things. But I have done several dual deployments, and I can tell you that to set up a rocket that way is really not that complicated. It seems complicated at first, but it's really not that bad. But even still, there are several different ways to do it. And the whole point of dual deployment or close proximity is to be able to recover your rocket closer to the launch pad and not have it drift so far. So in Oklahoma, when the winds come sweeping down the plains here in Oklahoma, you want to be able to bring your rocket down, without it drifting too far. So when you start to get into high power, the rockets are going higher. I typically am in anywhere between the 1,500 to 2,500 foot altitude. That's about how I fly. I've got some rockets that are capable of more, but like I said, only like the 3-inch Thor has a tracker in it. So any of these other ones, I don't really want to lose them. And I kind of like seeing them anyway. The kind of the low, slow, up to 2,500 feet, they're pretty hard to see. But if you're in the 1,500 to 2,000 foot range altitude, you can usually see these rockets. So anyhow, I'm starting to ramble, but what I wanted to do on this video is just kind of show the different ways that OKTurbo does close proximity or dual deployment. And like I said, it doesn't always have to be with an altimeter. So this is an old rocket that I built years ago. It's an upscale of a Mighty Mick Thrustline Aerospace Mighty Mick kit, a low power kit. I think I still have it over here somewhere, but back in the day, that was one of those. No, I think it's actually in my low power box. But back in the day, that was a 24 millimeter, low power rocket, just a simple 3-fin nose cone kind of design. But it has just handsome proportions. It uses kind of that blunter nose cone, which is the same nose cone that's on the Red Max. So this is just really a giant model rocket. It's 4-inch lock tube. It's all scratch built. There's no altimeter in it, but ever since they came out with this chute release, it made dual deployment capable for pretty much any rocket. So as long as this thing can fit, it's all tangled up here, I'll get it here in a minute, but as long as this thing can fit inside the tube and wrap up your parachute, this is the way to do a close proximity dual deployment. There's kind of a learning curve with it a little bit, but the main point is you've got to have that parachute wrapped tight. If there's any fluff to it all where this band wraps around, I've taken the rubber band off and I actually use like a hair tie. So I went to Walmart, bought a bunch of hair ties, so I use those instead. They seem to not stick to the chute as much. So I will show how I use this. So this Mighty Mick, straight up just a big model rocket. It's got 38 millimeter motor mount, no altimeter. I just simulate to the altitude based on the rocket motor that I'm using, use motor eject. The parachute comes out at whenever, hopefully it's at apogee, but whenever the motor ejection charge pops it off, then I've got the chute kind of wrapped up with the chute release. I usually set this to, 600, 500 feet. Then this will release the parachute, so you kind of get a little close proximity. So there's one way to do it. Kind of the next step up in the world of OKTurbo is to go what I've done on the Red Max, the big Red Max. So this is actually a kit I bought from Vanderburn Rocketry when they were doing the clones of the Estes Der Big Red Max, or Maxi Red Max, I think is actually what they call it. It's 4-inch. But there's actually an altimeter in the nose cone of this guy. So this is one way to do it too. So this is, head-in deployment, whatever you want to call it. But there's a an altimeter that's inside of this nose cone, and I've done a few things to try and make that work as best I can. So that's really the best way to go. You don't have to do too much. There's sometimes when you're picking a delay for the motor, you're doing it off a simulation, and sometimes it's a little early, a little too late. That's the advantage of the altimeter. The altimeter will fire that charge at apogee. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. There's more complications because you're setting up ejection charge and things like that. But the trade-off is you get the nose cone to come off at apogee. And I also use the shoot release on this one too. So it's not really dual deploy in that the altimeter fires both charges. The altimeter fires the apogee charge, everything opens up, the parachute is still bound up by the shoot release, comes down to 500 feet and then lets go. So I've got some video on my channel that shows both of these rockets flying. The Mighty Mick I'm actually rebuilding because it came down hard. It got this crack in it, which I could probably put some fiberglass over, but I'm building a new one. It actually has a baffle in it too, so I'm going to show the details on the baffle, things like that. Once I'm done with these two, there's the full-blown dual deploy where the altimeter fires both charges. So I've got that on my 4-inch Predator. I've got it on the 4-inch Thor. I've got that dual deploy don't charges on the altimeter on the 3-inch Thor, on the Rapo X, even the Horizon. So there's a few of those, I don't know what you would call it, more traditional dual deployment where the altimeter is firing both charges. So I'll break down one of those rockets, kind of go through it too, show how that works. But I'm going to do this because this is an easy way to get into it. I've had pretty good luck with the shoot release, but like I said, there are some tricks to it. So let me break down the Mighty Mick and let's go through it, and I'll show you how OKTurbo does it. So this is the old Mighty Mick. Let's break it down. Like I said, it's really a fairly just simple. It's just a big model rocket, really. I think it weighs around, everything loaded, 5 pounds, something like that. So it's not very heavy. It's just cardboard tube, lock tube. They are 1/4 inch thick plywood fins. The nose cone is one that Gordon Agnella made for me years ago. It's turned balsa back when you could get giant chunks of balsa. So it's just a really nice piece. Like I said, this was, good grief, I can't remember. He probably made that 15 years ago, I would be guessing. So this tube section is removable, although it's kind of stuck right now just from all the years. But there's a baffle in here. So this is, like I said, 4-inch lock tube, everything's scratch built. There's a couple of centering rings that I bought from Lock. Nothing too fancy, simulated and built it in Rock Sim, simulated it. Let me go over here and get my replacement Mighty Mick. It's still in primer, in between sanding. What I'm using on it is, and I might build another one. Actually, I'm going to try and do a little concept with the Mighty Mick and make it kind of modular. So I'm thinking that what I'll do is I'll build one with just, the cardboard airframe. This one has the baffle in it, which kind of prevents you from having to use a, any kind of wadding or anything like that to keep the ejection charge from, burning up your stuff, your recovery harness and your parachute. So that's the point of the baffle. But this is removable. Then I can add like an altimeter in here, put drogue chute, main chute. So it would be kind of this modular thing depending on where you're at. I built this one with a 38 millimeter. Lock also sells that lock-in fin or something like that. I think what they call it. I used it on the Predator and I think one other rocket. I think I used it also on my big Iris. And that's a deal where it has a 54 millimeter motor mount, but you can also put a 38 millimeter adapter in it. It has like the little fin lock thing, so it builds a really nice fin can. So I'll probably build another one of these, fiberglass the tube, put in that 54 millimeter altimeter, build it stronger. But what the nose cone on this is actually an Estes. These from time to time these are not in stock, so they came in stock. So I bought I think 3 of them. It's the same nose cone that's on the Maxi Dured Max. It's really basically the same nose cone. I think Gordon's is a little bit longer, but it's the same basic profile. So it's just kind of that, I don't know, rounder, chunkier looking nose cone. I like the profile of it. So that's what that is. So, I mean, this will allow me to put, you know, a tracker inside of here, whatever I want to do. So if I go modular with, you know, this whole Mighty Mitt concept, it will be basically, you'll have a fin can, you can put altimeters in it, you can put trackers in the nose cone, depending on where you're flying. You could stack it together for high altitude, or you can just still fly it on the 38mm simple, like the old one. So let's break this down. So this is the nose cone. Here's the recovery harness. I went really heavy on the recovery harness, and in hindsight, it's probably really too much. That's tubular Kevlar. But it is motor eject, so you never know. Sometimes you get surprises and things come out too early, so I wanted it to be really strong, and it is. This is a piece of flame retardant fabric that I bought from Duck Canvas. I just bought a roll of it, several yards of it, and so I just cut it up, and it's fire resistant fabric, so it's pretty similar to the ones that you buy, but it's just a lot cheaper. I haven't sewn the edges or anything, so it's just really a piece of cloth, so easily replaceable, pretty cheap. Here's the parachute. The only real reason, you know, the baffle keeps the ejection charge from really burning things and keeps the you know, black powder particles from kind of getting in there. The reason I use a blanket on this one, and this is a brand new one, the other one was getting pretty smoked. Well, just dirty from being around for over the years, not really smoked, but the reason I use this is to make a nice tight burrito for the chute release, and that's kind of my technique. So before I get too far into this, let me take apart this other Mighty Mitt. So that shows, you know, the motor mount. I'm going to hold that together with plastic rivets. Nothing very fancy, just using, you know, just the L brackets, kind of simple motor retention. Keep it simple, you know. This is the baffle, so let me take this part out. And this is kind of the modular part of it. This can be replaced with an electronic stay. So this is the baffle. It's going to have the plastic rivets that holds it together, but the harness will attach here. You've got two offset, I think they're 38mm motor mount tubes actually, but the two offset tubes. So this is the aft end, the bottom end. When the motor ejection charge goes off, the pressure comes through here, kind of goes through this baffle and back out. So your particles of burning black powder kind of get contained in here, but the pressure is still able to come out, pops everything out. Never had a problem on this one. I don't see why I'd ever have a problem on that one. You kind of have to rattle around and clean that out every once in a while. This is all brand new. But that's the baffle. So that really keeps you from having to do anything too fancy on with wadding or blankets around the parachute. Like I said, I use the blanket just mostly because it makes it easier to get a nice tight bundle for the chute release. Get that out of the way now. So I'll show you how I prep this for dual deployment. So here's my parachutes. So this is a 5-foot Rocket Man chute. I've got all flavors of chutes. I do like these. They seem to wrap up nice and tight, don't take up much room. There's only 4 shroud lines. There's a lot of discussion about, you know, efficiency of parachutes. I'm not sure how efficient it is, but it works just fine for me. So what I'll do is kind of get the shroud lines inside like that. Start wrapping it up. And when you get ready to put the chute release around it, you want to make sure it's tied onto something. So there's like the retention harness. I'm sure what they call it, the leash. So that's when this lets go, it keeps you from losing the chute release. So I'll put that through on this little quick link buckle. So there it is. So it's going to be close. So let me show you how OKTurbo does this. I'm trying to get as much air and get it as compact as I can. Got my chute release kind of hanging out over here waiting. And it's really this final wrap that you can really get things tight. Trying to pull in the corners, keeping things neat. So this is the point where you really can get it tight. So it's like, I went in thirds with that parachute. It may have been better to get it shorter and fatter. That's pretty small diameter. But what this is a pretty tight bundle. Let me try that again. Let me see if this, that was thirds. Let's try quarters. Maybe a little shorter, fatter burrito. Everything's inside. Trying to squish out the air. Now, is this the definitive way of doing it? No. This is the way I do it. So I get this end going first, bring it around, keep stuffing, wrapping, stuffing, wrapping. Now, without the chute release, I'm not sure how critical that would be. You just really want the parachute protector just to keep all of it away from the ejecting charge stuff. So with this, I'm not really trying to do that. This is coming undone on me. I'm just trying to make a really tight bundle. Get all the air out. I think that's good. Okay, I think I'll be happy with that. So now you get your chute release. So it's all tied or connected there. Get your little hook. I'm holding it with my thumb here. This just will click in, just like that. So there you go. And what you want is you want this to pop loose. If the parachute is too loose, it'll squish in. It kind of pulls in on itself. So you can see that's pretty good around that wrap. You know, you want that to be able to flop around and not come loose. So give it a little shake. That looks good. So what you can do too to test this, and what I may want to do is I may want to change this attachment point. I may actually want to go further down here because it's kind of pulling this part out, which doesn't really matter here as long as this keeps tight. So it may be a good idea to not attach that to that quick link, but maybe trying to attach it down here where it's further away from, you know, all the folds here. But you can test these pretty easily. So what you do is you just turn it on. It'll blink a few times. Okay, so it's set to 500 feet. I've got 4 green dots on the battery, so the battery's good. To test it, to make sure that my bundle and it's all going to come loose, you just punch the open button until it blinks, and then it starts a countdown. And what you want it to do is just pop off, just like that. So that's what you want it to do. So that's kind of how that happens. Like I said, it's set to 500 feet, so that would pop open just like that at 500 feet. It can sit out there on the pad. You know, I've had them sit out there for, I don't know, probably 30 minutes. The chute release, I mean, I haven't charged this thing in months. It's amazing how long the batteries actually go. It can be sitting out there waiting for 30 minutes, an hour, I'm not sure how long, but it won't do anything until it sees that altitude change and then you're flying it. So I haven't ever had a problem with it turning itself off sitting on the pad. With the baffle, there's really nothing else you need to do. You just start stuffing it in. Plenty of room. And then it goes in like that. On Mighty Mick, I use toothpick shear pins. Old school, very simple. So there's some holes here that are actually going into holes that are inside of this plywood ring that's on the base of that nose cone. So I line up my match marks. I get toothpicks. Let me just grab a toothpick and I'll show you how I do that. See if one's handy. Now it's going to be that fresh toothpick. So there's two of these toothpick shear pins. And actually Scott Binder kind of got me onto this with his Thor designs, because this is what he does. There's a little hole drilled there. Just kind of rotate, and it just breaks off the tip of that. So now that nose cone's held on. So if there's there are vent holes, but if anything happens, the nose cone's a little heavy, you don't want any drag separation, things like that. So it'll stay on until the ejection charge goes off. So always worked for me. So that's one way to do dual deployment. With a chute release on a very, very simple rocket. So let me put this away and we'll talk about the altimeter ejection on the Red Max. So here's the Mega Red Max clone from Vanderburn, Toby Vanderbeek, when he was, I think, I can't remember who owns them now. They've changed names. Toby's actually sold his company. They still make these things. This is a fairly easy rocket to clone. I mean, you have to kind of watch the Estes website to see when these nose cones are available. But I mean, it's a Red Max, so I mean, it's very easy. They kind of have this crazy construction on the fins, where it's like this skeletal structure on the inside. I think it's plywood. Then there's a couple of sheets of balsa on the outside. So that's kind of part of the look of the Red Max, is these big thick fins. So I've made this one. I've got a one that I made years ago that has a modular motor system. I'm going over to my rocket wall here. So here's this one, which is the big Red Max, and then I've got two of the smaller ones. So this guy has seen a lot of flights, but I'm able to change the motor mount in this one, put dual 24 millimeters, 29, 24, so I can just set this up however I want. But this is one I built years ago, and Gordon made the nose cone for that one too, so I like the Red Max. It's just one of my favorite designs. I'm a kid of the 70s, and that's when, that was around, so just kind of that goofy graphics and all that. It's probably not very PC right now, but oh well, Gen X doesn't care. So this is what this is. So I fly this dual deploy, close proximity, an altimeter in the nose cone. It's 38 millimeter. My favorite motor in this one is a Loki H144. So roars off the pad. I'm thinking 2,000 feet altitude. This is the little 3D printed motor retainer that Toby sold when he sold these things. It's got rail buttons. I don't think it's a lock tube, but it's a 4-inch tube that Estes sold, which is basically a high power 4-inch. I mean, it fits on a lock tube, so it's the same thing, only different. So to show you kind of how I did this, I've indexed the nose cone, so it only goes on one way. So it slides down in there. Okay, sorry, there's a little pause there. My wife just came back from walking. So I've got this indexed. So what I've taken is just a small piece of body tube, cut it into a semicircle, put a notch in the body tube like that. This is glued onto the nose cone, so when it goes in, and the reason I've done it on this rocket is because it lines up this hole. And what this hole is actually the sensing port for the altimeter that's inside of here. So let me take this off and you kind of see what I've done. So you want, the altimeter to detect apogee, and it does that through sensing the external air pressure. So, you get kind of weird turbulence and stuff up here on the nose cone. The altimeter is sitting about in here in the nose cone. You could put a port up here. It would probably work, because really all you're wanting apogee basically when the rocket stops. So velocity is pretty low. But just to try and get better, more accurate readings on the altimeter, I placed the sensing port down here. So this looks like it's probably in the body tube, but it's not. It's actually in the base of that nose cone. So I've got an old piece of motor tube and made like a tunnel, and it goes inside there. And so this actually goes inside the hollow part of the nose cone, and so it's sensing the air pressure outside, just like that. Like I said, it's sensing the pressure, atmospheric pressure through that hole, through the tunnel, into this hollow part of the nose cone. When I first set this up, I had a magnetic switch on it, but there was a short period when Tripoli or NAR or somebody said, yeah, that's not a good idea for power to an altimeter. So, okay, well, I wanted to fly this rocket. I just ended up cutting a hole and putting a screw switch there. So that's what that is. That's the screw switch to turn the altimeter on. So let me take it apart, and I will show you kind of how this goes inside the nose cone. So there's the recovery harness with the parachute, and this is the same thing as like the Mighty Mick is. The altimeter is only firing the apogee charge. It's not firing the main chute or whatever at 500 feet. So what it's doing is I wrap up the chute just like I did before in a burrito. Get the chute release on here, tied on. It's all wrapped up. It goes inside, and this is a short body tube, so there's not a whole lot of room in there anyway. So by putting the altimeter in here, I'm using all the body tube for the recovery harness. So let me disconnect this quick link, and I'll show you kind of how this is set up. Okay, let's cover that up. Get that out of the way. So this is the nose cone. So this is what I'm looking at. I did put a little charge well there, but I haven't really used that yet. I just kind of like doing those omnidirectional glove tip charges. They seem to work the best for me. So this is a little terminal block. The wires go down inside of here for the altimeter. I could unscrew this and take this out, but it's not really in the way of anything, so I just left it there. When you're still learning how what you like. Some people like these little charge wells. Pour the powder inside there, put the tip of the E-match in, cover it up, fill up the empty space with some dog barf wadding, tape it up, run that. No, that just seemed like extra work to me. This way, I just attach the omnidirectional glove tip charge to that, tie it in like I do on all my other rockets. So, let me show you how this comes out. So. Loosen up all the screws, and this, all these parts here, the centering rings came from Toby. Now this is all my own thing here. I kind of went out on my own path there to figure that part out. So you can get electronics in your nose cone. Usually, if you're flying high altitude, high power stuff, that you would normally be like a tracker that you put in here. But for this little short fat rocket, I'm using it for altimeter, altitude, apogee deploy. So, see if I got it all loose. There we go. So now it just comes out. That's the wire that goes to the switch. So I've got the connector here. So that shows the altimeter. So right now it's set, it says drogue. There's no charge hooked up to the main. So the drogue is the apogee event. There's no main shoot event at 500, 600, however you set the altimeter. It's just the apogee drogue event. That goes straight to here. I'll use some of that poster tack to kind of seal up the hole. And that's that. 9-volt battery, and I'll replace that before I fly it again next time. Like I said, when I first had this set up, there was like I had a master power switch, and then there was a magnetic switch set here that was against the side. You use the magnet, turn it on and off. I think they're okay again, but I mean, why change it back? It was only really maybe a 1-2 month period where, quote unquote, the magnetic switches were bad. It's I think a Featherweight. It's a manufacturer. They made it. Kind of cool, a little finicky. I didn't really want to have to drill a hole in the nose cone, but I did it anyway, so I'm not going back. But that's the way the altimeter's set. And you can see, this is all hollow. So once you get that sealed up in there, it's reading atmospheric pressure through that hole. And that's kind of why I set that up with the with that index, so that hole will always get lined up. So that is a close proximity dual deploy using a shoot release and an altimeter for the apogee event. So that's how you do that. So that's kind of the next step, is actually using an altimeter for the apogee event. And it makes it fairly simple, because I can set up the motor, and I can use my, of course I've flown enough where I kind of know the altitude it's going to get anyway. But you can set up your delay to be a couple seconds after apogee, so that if this doesn't fire correctly, boom, that'll go off a couple seconds later, so you still have a second chance for getting everything out. So the nose cone is separating with this, and then you still have a backup with your motor ejection charge. So that's how I do that. So that's kind of the second scheme on a dual deploy. And I'll get out one of my other rockets, and we'll talk about kind of the, the full house, the traditional way of doing it. OKTurbo back with my 4-inch diameter 1/3 scale iris. So this started as a lock kit, but I kind of did a little more than sport scale to it, so I added my details here and things like that. But this is a lock kit. It's a dual deploy. There's an altimeter bay right here, so we'll go through that. I do want to show you this. I kind of mentioned the locking ring thing on my, if I go modular on the Mighty Mick. So this has that system. So I bought this with it. Let me see if I can get this so you can see it better. So this shows the motor mount. Right now it's 38 millimeter, which, like I said, I'm level 1 certified. So as far as 54 millimeters on iMotors, I don't have too many choices. I've flown some of those, the soda can looking 54 millimeter Aerotechs I-229. There's another one that's a red. There's a blue, a red, and I can't remember what else. But you take this out. See if I can get it to come out. Of course it's stuck because we're on the camera. There we go. So there's your 54 millimeter. So I can take these retainers off, screw them right in there, and that'll take a 54 millimeter motor. So that's what that's all about. And it's got the notch centering ring, so it aligns all the fins up. It's just a really neat system. It's not very expensive. That's what Lock sells that. It's just it's really neat. It's really nice for scratch building. I've used it on, let me see here. I used it on my 4-inch Predator. They have a 3-fin version, a 4-fin version. So, I mean, it won't work with everything. But if you're scratch building and you want a modular motor mount kind of a thing, it's very nice. So, I mean, my intent would be someday, you know, whenever I get level 2 certified, I can fly this on a J motor, 54 millimeter, and it'll go right in, no issue. So there's that. Let's get this turned back around. We'll start breaking it down and showing how it's set up. So let's go to the nose cone first, because your main parachute is in this upper section. The drogue parachute is in the lower section. So I'm using the toothpick shear pins on this one also. So here's the recovery harness. I've indexed this one also kind of the same way as that. I don't have the parachute in right now, but this is your main parachute compartment. So that's where all of it will go. This one takes a pretty, I got like a big orange and white NASA style chute that goes in it because it's a scale rocket. You know, you want it to look kind of like a scale chute. So that's where your main parachute gets loaded up into. See how that indexes doesn't twist. So in here is your altimeter, and it has both the main charge and the drogue charge. The drogue charge is what goes off at apogee. This is the switch ring for that altimeter. So there's a screw switch right in there. I turned it on. So you take it out, you get your motor in it, no igniter. You take it out to the field, you get it on the pad, then you arm your altimeter. Because you don't want anything to happen while you're putting the igniter in and the thing launches without an altimeter going. So that's why you do that. There's kind of some of these little plastic rivets that are holding this top part on. So, you know, this stays attached. So when the rocket fires, it goes up to apogee. There are vent holes that are, here's the vent holes here. Basically the vent hole for the altimeter in the altimeter bay is around that screw switch. So that's how it's sensing the outside pressure, air pressure. So then kaboom, this is what separates at apogee. So at apogee, this will separate. And inside of here is the, this is so awkward, is the drogue parachute. So there's a small parachute here. And it's all wrapped up to protect it. Because you're also still using the motor as a backup also. So you know, simulated what's the apogee event happens at what time. It'll give you, RockSim will give you an optimal delay. Then I usually go 2 seconds after that. So I'm setting up the motor 2 seconds after, you know, my simulated apogee event. Here's a heavy duty drogue, just a little, because it's going high speed when it's coming down. You really just kind of want to slow the rocket down just a little bit, not very much, and kind of keep things orderly as it's falling. So that event goes off. And now it's falling from, you know, 2,000 feet, 2,500 feet. Then this nose cone, this all kind of in a V coming down like this. The nose cone is pointed downward. Then when it gets to the altitude set in your altimeter, boom, the main ejection charge goes off. So let me see if I can get these little rivets out without a screwdriver. I'm not sure if I can or not. Oh, yeah, I have to get the screwdriver. This is my special screwdriver for removing the plastic rivets. Got the tape to kind of protect the finish. Let me pull these rivets out. Okay, so those are out. Now the altimeter bay will come out of the upper section. See how I have it marked, forward, aft. I've got tape here to protect, because your ejection charges are going right here. They're hooking up to these these terminal strips. Just to save weight on this rocket, I didn't use any quick links or anything, so that stuff kind of adds up quickly on weight. So these are just really just tied on, taped up. So we can take this eBay outside of this. I'm hoping I'm not too far away so you guys can see what's going on here. This is just the standard lock 4-inch electronics bay. Injection black powder. I use 4F black powder. It's a little corrosive. So every once in a while I'll spray this down with some gun oil or something. So this comes off. I currently don't have that hooked up, so this will slide out quickly. Good grief. Okay, so there's the switch band, there's the power switch, so that's got a little connector that connects onto here, battery. This is an RRC2, very simple altimeter. And what I do here is just to keep things simple as I can, least number of connections, least number of things to go wrong. I'll actually attach the ejection charge straight here. So, you know, I've got blue, yellow, kind of telling me where they're going. The yellow wires are inside here, so they'll hook up to the altimeter. The blue ones will hook up here. They go to each end. That way I keep that straight. So that's it. This is a small altimeter I was using. It's Bluetooth. I never could get it to really work very good, but it's still mounted there. Trying to remember what that one's called. Never really was able to get the data off of it very easily, so I'm not sure what was going on with it. But anyhow, so that's that's how I set it up. This is just how you get it straight from lock. Nothing too complicated, nothing too fancy. Take the outside, that's how. Until that goes in. There you go. I'll put new batteries in whenever I fly it. And that's that. So, I mean, as you get bigger and heavier, you know, probably the biggest, heaviest rocket I have is this big stiletto. The reason it's heavy just because it's got the fiberglass nose cone, which is a lot of weight. The body tube is fiberglass cardboard. I can't remember how much it weighs, but as the rockets start to get heavier, I'm probably going to put dual 2 altimeters in here just to kind of have a backup. You know, maybe an RRC3 and RRC2 with 2 separate charges on both ends. So if something does malfunction, when you start getting into 20, 30-pound rockets, you really want to make sure that it's going to be safe, you know. You get lots of visitors on the rocket field, you know, when you're having big events and you don't want anything bad to happen. So there you go. That's the OKTurbo way of doing dual deployment. Add comments. If you've got any questions, I'll try and answer them. So I'm just, you know, I'm no expert, like I said, on any of this stuff. This is just how I do it, and I've had some pretty good success. So yeah, just trying to help. Thanks for watching.